welcome to Savage Minds. I'm your host, Julian Vigo. Today's guest is Sall Grover, the founder and CEO of the female-only social networking app Giggle. Prior to a startup career, Sall was a screenwriter in Hollywood, writing unproduced rom-coms about strong yet flawed women who realize they don't need a man. Sall recently welcomed a daughter, making the fight for women's and girls' rights much more personal to her. I welcome Sall Grover to Savage Minds. Just now, you were talking to me about a male sex offender in a women's prison in the UK, but I find this very cis heteronormative of you, because how do you know he's male? I mean, have you done the genital inspection that, you know, all women carry out, of course, if you read social media?
Yeah, well... It's so, whenever they say that as sort of this gotcha argument, it would be like, well, how do you know anyone's trans? I mean, how do you know anything? If you think that you have to inspect genitals, or you have to, or chromosomes or genetic testing, all the crap that they say, how do you know it's a woman or how do you know it's a male? How do you know that someone's trans then? But also, you know they know who a woman is because it's who they're desperately trying to emulate. So it's just pure gaslighting. They completely know. And yes, it's actually in Australia, not the UK. There's a male sex offender in a women's prison in Australia right now. And just every person we are contacting to try and get something done about it, it's just, it's just falling on deaf ears. I've actually been blocked by politicians on Twitter over this issue. By politicians, like elected government officials, blocking citizens on Twitter because you're trying to get a male sex offender out of a woman's prison. It's just nonsense.
If you've watched the first show of the season with Jon Stewart, he's gotten on board with this bullshit. And I'll be honest with you, he was someone who sort of saved my mind in the years post 9/11 while my country went to war, illegal wars, not declared wars by the Senate. I mean, we've just bypassed since Vietnam every single constitutional must. But that aside, he was the person that sort of kept me afloat with all the bullshit media.
I was such a Jon Stewart fan. I mean, actually, when I lived in the States, I used to like watch him like while I was in the bath. They would have like my TV just there, and I would have a bubble bath and drink whiskey and smoke a cigarette and watch Jon Stewart. That was like a routine I had. I was such a huge fan. So if someone was to tell me that I would be siding with Matt Walsh on this issue and not Jon Stewart, I would never have believed you. But one of the frustrating things is sort of these two guys like this are sort of just desperately trying to make this a left versus right issue. And it's one of my things that I'll critique Matt Walsh on until the cows come home, because what is a woman is not a left-right issue. It's just the answer is an adult human female. So these men who are trying to politicize it for their own popularity, their own profit, or whatever it is, it's actual real women who are paying the price of this. So it's just, so in one sense, someone like Matt Walsh is helping, and I don't mind someone getting popular and profiting off of, just doing good work. I have no problem with that. But while someone like him is out there spreading the word of what's happening and telling everyone that how absolutely fucking crazy everything currently is, he's really framing it as this like own the libs kind of way. And you're like, yeah, they're saying stupid stuff, but it's just, where does that get us? Like, we're just going to sit there and fight amongst each other. That's why I used to go like, do you actually want a solution here, or is this like a fun mudslinging match for you? And then for Jon Stewart to join the fight, where he has it feels like all he's read on this issue was written in crayon on a napkin. I'm fine if somebody has a different opinion to me on an issue. I'm not cool if somebody in a position of influence weighs in on an issue and they are uneducated to do so. Because either Jon Stewart and his team. So he has a team of writers, and writers on shows like his are usually young, like straight out of Ivy League school type writers. So that's where he would be being influenced from. When you have that he hasn't himself gone, okay, like, you want me to do a show about what is a woman? Let me just get the basics before we go into this. And like, I don't know, fucking Google. Like a dictionary, because he did the whole definitions thing. Well, they weren't definitions. They were just stupid examples from throughout history of misogyny, but from people who clearly knew what a woman was, because otherwise, who are we talking about? So he never actually said the definition of a woman. He just highlighted misogyny and then added to it. And so it's really, really disappointing. I'm at the point where I just like, who do you trust? Who do you believe on this issue? I don't know.
I hear you. I haven't yet watched it. I only watch clips. And every time I sit down to watch it, either my kids are with me and, to quote my daughter, "Mommy, why are you always writing about men in dresses?" So no, I don't want to expose her to that anymore. Or
I have a thing that my daughter's first words are going to be trans women are men.
One can only hope.
I literally think she's just going to be like a toddler and she's just going to blurt it out. And I'm like, oh, there you go.
I've been doing this for a decade. And when I first started, I was warned. I was told by this lesbian activist feminist in the UK, in London, in a bar during Gay Pride, I had what is called pregnancy rhinitis. Never had it in my first 2 pregnancies, but basically I was coughing uncontrollably for a few weeks. It was so bad. Even that night in Pride, it started to subside a bit, but it wasn't great. But she kept telling me, I remember coughing, and she was talking about the trans lobby in the UK. She was talking about certain elected councillors who were trying to overturn women's rights, who were in fact men, in frocks, as she put it. And I just thought, she's a little drunk. I think she's exaggerating. I thought I did.
Yeah.
And then she called me and we met up and she told me more. Part of me would never cave in because I, coming from academia, also having seen queer theory early on, I worked in it, I've written on it, I've taught it. Not this crap. That's not, in fact, people say, Judith, but she didn't even, her book, Gender Trouble, had to do with the performativity of gender, because the performativity of gender is the only way gender exists. I wrote my doctoral thesis on this, in fact, a critique of her later book, Bodies That Matter, where she sort of crept in the transformative nature of these surgeries, hormones, without saying it explicitly. But there's a great Cuban writer, Severo Sarduy. He wrote a book called La Simulación, and I think it's translated into English, but he talks about how the only woman who can do the hipermujer, the hyper woman, is the transvestite on stage, lip syncing Miriam Makeba. I'm sort of quoting from him. But it's a really great look at how femininity, by you, me, men on stage, whatever, even men on the street, is performative. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine to acknowledge that it's an archetype, because that's what it is. I mean, that's what Simone de Beauvoir was talking about. But what these men are doing is they say, well, Simone de Beauvoir said anyone could become a woman. Remember?
One is not born but becomes a woman. Yeah. It's a quote taken completely out of context. Yes. They don't read the paragraph before or after that quote.
Right, because it's longer than a tweet, so they can't.
Yeah.
So, they've completely misinterpreted the point. They've reversed it, actually. She was not saying anyone can become a woman, go become one. She was saying that girls are groomed into becoming women. Finito. I mean, it's very clear what she was saying. And so what we're up against is a lobby. As I spoke recently with Michael Biggs on the show, and he and I were in the States doing graduate work at around the same time. He and I came into the same arguments. We saw the same rises in the disappearance of feminist studies, or the twinning of feminist studies with gender studies. And we saw this happening. We were very sympathetic to the idea, well, gender studies at the time and queer studies was about gay. It was not about anything else. It was gay. The name queer was used in the same way that the N-word is used by rappers in the 90s to sort of re-empower them to take that word back. The same thing with queer, because queer was a word that was used more prevalently in the UK than in the US. But it was a word that was used derogatorily to refer to gay men. Now, skip to the fact that now we're in the throes of what is clearly a social contagion. Lisa Littman has worked on ROGD amongst children, and I spoke to her about this, even though it's not her specialty, working with adults, but I suggested that it's not just children where there's social contagion. It's everywhere. Because when you get down to self-ID, and look at what's just happened in Scotland, anyone can say they're trans. You can transition Monday, detransition Tuesday, do it again and again, cha-cha-cha. These words are meaningless. And it harkens back to the problems with how the notion of gender identity was formed in the midst of the most repressive, sexually repressive, woman repressive era in American history of the 20th century. That is the 1950s. As I said to someone the other day, the 1960s didn't come from nowhere. So we had a very repressive decade. Post-war, the beginning of the atomic age, you had all sorts of paranoia going on within the American public. People were digging bomb shelters in their backyards, convinced that the Russians were going to come and attack. You had people practicing what to do in case of nuclear war, and women were given blenders, toasters, and washing machines because they were being told to return home from the jobs that they had taken from the men. The men are back, girls. Get back in the kitchen. And so this was all happening. Of course, science was in the throes of trying to prove itself. You had advances in endocrinological medicine. You had advances in plastic surgery right at that time. So what better thing to do than to tell a man who wants to identify as, all in quotes, as a woman, that they can fix that? Because I asked Michael Biggs, why wasn't the solution just, I joked on Twitter yesterday that I want to open a gender clinic in my home. Any man who thinks he's a woman, come and clean my house, please. Because I guarantee you that I'm going to have detransitioners by dinner.
No, I completely agree. I mean, we're just not seeing men who identify as women doing the really unglamorous parts of femininity, are we? I mean, they're just not cooking and cleaning and taking the burden of unpaid labor and all of that. And that has historically, for all of time, been put on women. They're not women. They're just they're pornified versions of femininity, and it's just becoming clearer and clearer by the day. I mean, I remember, but when I first got into this, that you were saying when you first heard about it, and like, gosh, don't we wish all lesbians were listened to 10, 20 years ago, we would be in such a different position right now. But when I was first, when this was brought to my attention, I mean, I'm a relative late comer to it. It was February 2020. And at the very beginning, you want to be really polite, because I'm a polite person, and I'm pretty much a live and let live person. So like when I was thinking, and like when we were like doing development of the company and everything, and we were talking, and I was like, sure, trans women can come on, because I just heard in the background of society, sort of thing of like, oh, be inclusive. And I was like, yeah, cool. And, this is a tiny minority of people. And I was like, yeah, I have no doubt. And so I was thinking we were talking about like maybe one a month would want to come on. You know what I mean? Like it was just such you wouldn't notice it, basically. Never in my wildest nightmare did I think that there was just this shift in society happening where we're just supposed to believe that men are women. And if you say more obviously no, then you're a raging bigot. It is without a doubt the most misogynistic thing I'm going to say ever, because I've thought a lot about this, and I'm like, women weren't allowed the right to vote. We weren't allowed to do anything. But at least they knew who the fuck we were. I mean, because if those will all get taken away as well, that you watch, if we were to let this happen and just, they take away like female-only spaces, they take away female support, female language, and you take away female language, and then you wait to how quickly something where like, even though the language would be different, but we would not have the ability to have bank accounts, that we could become property again, second-class citizens so quickly. I just, yeah, but there's a part of me that thinks like, wow, like I can't believe it took men this long to realize this is how easy it was to take away our rights. Like, wow, they really are that stupid. But I mean, it just, yeah, when at the beginning, I really did. I tried to be polite. I have no more politeness left in me, none whatsoever. It was at the beginning of this year when I had the human rights complaint against me and my company. It was upheld by the Australian Human Rights Commission, and then I was taken to federal court. Fortunately, the man who thinks is a woman withdrew the case because he knew he would lose. But all niceties and politeness went out the window there. So I was like, no, I really tried. And that's where it led me. So now I'm just going to tell it how it is. And I'm only speaking the truth.
Could you back up and just explain what happened? Because the Australian Human Rights Commission, a taxpayer-funded organization, pursued you for making a business decision based on biological reality.
Yes.
You created an app for females and were the target of this transgender activist who decided that you were being bigoted and not allowing this male to use the social networking platform that you had created uniquely for females.
Yes. So basically, that's exactly what happened. So basically, like, to give a little bit of context to it, because it is kind of an interesting thing, like now, like in hindsight, when I've had to go and piece it all together, because obviously, like whenever, like September last year, when I would have blocked this man from being on the app, to me, it was just like, oh, because there's sometimes thousands a day. I mean, it just, it wasn't something that I remembered it, but I had to, because of the human rights complaint, I had to go and piece it all back together. And so it's now become like the most memorable user or potential user of the whole app. But so basically this 54-year-old man who claims to be a woman has had his legal documentation changed to female. Apparently the birth certificate says female, and which is a nightmare in and of itself, that you can have a legal fiction like that. And anyway, he is kind of notorious in Australia a little bit, at least amongst sort of feminist circles. He's watching us all the time. I mean, I didn't know this until the human rights complaint had happened, but he was complaining about lots of women in general. He's really just, he just doesn't like women who don't accept him as a woman. And really does try to make life just a little bit more annoying for them all. So in January, I got the notice from the Australian Human Rights Commission that we had a human rights complaint against the company and me personally for gender identity discrimination. And so I got a lawyer involved immediately. And because I had to I had basically this person's name, Roxy Tickle. So I went back through obviously I can look for past users or anything to see who it was, and I saw their picture and I was like, well, this is just a picture of because to get on the app you have to take a selfie to show whether you're a man or woman, which used to be the most uncontroversial thing you could say, is you could tell if it was a man or a woman by looking at them. But anyway, apparently it's now so controversial, it's just ridiculous. But I saw the picture and I saw a man, and I'm right. It is a picture of a male person, and not even somebody who was performing femininity in any way, not someone who was like a male who was wearing makeup and had styled hair or anything like that. It was just a male in a t-shirt. So I had, not only did I not know anything about this individual's gender identity, they didn't give anything away on that. So I couldn't possibly have discriminated based on gender identity. I discriminated based on sex, which I'm legally allowed to do because I have a specific legal aim to do it. Anyway, so basically I could have had a thing called conciliation with him, and to be resolved and basically dismissed from the Human Rights Commission. I would have had to have agreed to let him and all men who claim to be women onto the app, and to change how, basically to moderate how women speak on the app so not to offend them. So basically, just women couldn't talk about our rights or ourselves anymore. And then I also had to go to education classes on sex and gender. And so I said a big, absolutely no way to all of this, knowing that if I said no to it, he could potentially file in federal court. And he had 60 days to do that. And he did it at literally like 5 minutes to 5 p.m. on the 60th day. So he waited at the very end to do it, just to drag it out, it's just ridiculous. And so we got a really great barrister. She's just amazing. We got her on board straight away. And she's a barrister in Australia who's very, very eager to get the gender identity clause out of the Sex Discrimination Act here. Because basically in Australia, so we have the Sex Discrimination Act, and we do have provisions in there for single-sex spaces, and they're still completely legal in Australia. However, there is this gender identity clause within the Sex Discrimination Act that just essentially muddles it, because you're just kind of like, well, what does it mean? You know what I mean? It's just, I would argue that having a gender identity clause in the Sex Discrimination Act is discrimination to sex. It doesn't make sense. It just shouldn't be there at all. Because someone's gender identity, if they want to have one, I think of it as like a soul type thing in a religion. It's not my business. I don't have to believe it. No one can make me believe it. I'm too educated on it now. I'm never going to believe it. I've seen the evidence. And so so basically our barrister was very eager to just go all in with the case and go after it constitutionally and not just respond to a run-of-the-mill gender identity discrimination thing. It was like, no, let's use this opportunity to get this clause out of the law and maintain female spaces in Australia. And then he withdrew. So we didn't get to go and do it.
And if you had gone to court, would that have had a knock-on effect within the law?
Yeah, it would have cemented female-only spaces and sport, for that matter, in Australia. Australia-wide, it would have cancelled out self-ID. We would have had to basically, how it works here, I mean, I'm not a legal mind, but it was something about bringing in all the attorney generals. It was going to be very expensive. We're talking like, to start with, like $250,000 sort of thing. So there's going to be crazy fundraising that we were going to do for it. But it basically would have just cemented women's rights as they have. The Sex Discrimination Act was written in 1984 here, which is sort of an ironic year, really, at this point. And so, yeah, and there's obviously been little things added to it or amended over the time, but and things definitely do change. You update maternity leave needs and things like that. But gender identity in the Sex Discrimination Act is not that. It's not an update, a necessary update. I mean, it's just it shouldn't be there. And so so it just will it be challenged in court soon enough? Yes, hopefully it will. There's rumbles of other things happening that will challenge it, which is exciting.
Since this has occurred, what has happened then with your app? Because as you're well aware, again, speaking with Michael Biggs the other day, he said something that is hard for feminists to hear, but it's still true. I hate to say it. He distinguishes between what was then called transsexualism of the latter half of the 20th century, which was largely male surgeons, male advocates, men undergoing these processes, to today, from this century on, these last 22 years, has been a majority of females supporting this narrative and females undergoing these treatments. And there's a larger issue. This is not to say that this isn't misogyny or whatnot. We know that loads of women are self-hating. We know that loads of women are what I saw called the other day, like me feminists.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I honestly, like, just quickly, it's two different things when you go like the women who are transitioning and the women who are supporting the men who are transitioning. That's two completely separate issues that need to be looked at separately. And maybe there's crossovers, but I mean, there definitely is, but they are in sort of the motivations for it are completely different.
Yes, and in fact, one could argue the reason why women are transitioning is brought about, such as the paradox that you had to deal with this man trying to get into a woman's only space. This man believes himself, this is the irony, he believes himself to be a woman. He's a delusional person. He believes that he loves women because he imitates them. That's part and parcel of misogyny. I hate to break it to him. And the women who support his rights, you see this all the time, he's just being his true, authentic self, are themselves detached from biological reality in terms of what it means and effects for them. Because a lot of these women pushing this are not mothers. They're not, a lot of women are not over 45, 50 doing this. It's vastly a 20-something demographic. And a lot of those women age out of that support because they see something. I've had loads of women write me. I've had loads of women write me who said, when you started working on this, I thought you were a transphobe. But now this is what happened to me. And they tell me their story, because there's always that straw that breaks the camel's back moment in this debate where women are like, but he's just, I can pee next to a guy. Who cares? Well, you care if it's 2 a.m. and you're drunk or drugged out of your mind in a disco. And like, we've all taken refuge in toilets.
My thing is, like, you care if it's the worst man you've ever met in your entire life suddenly saying he's a woman. That's how you make them understand, because they're all just thinking of these like gentle, victimized, people who, males who now comes, I can't even think of them in that light, but anyway, whatever, it is what it is. And I'm like, okay, cool, whatever like cutesy, lovely, gentle, feminine image you have in your mind with self-ID and this sort of continual social contagion and rapid onset gender dysphoria, which it's not gender dysphoria, is it? But this social contagion of misogyny and autogynephilia, I suppose. It's like, just think of the worst guy you've ever known, because some of these horrible men who are doing this there's a woman in the world that's the worst man she's ever met. She's petrified of him. So, it's a thing of, could I pee next to a guy? 9 out of 10 scenarios, probably I'd be fine with it, but that's not the point. The point of it is that we need to have safe spaces for certain things because of just the differences of these two demographics in a whole, the differences between males and females. And so, has a certain wave of feminism sort of confused that, and by saying we're exactly the same and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I don't know if that has that much to do with this, to be honest, because where the whole thing of, once you'd have thought that the whole, you're a trans man or a trans woman because the sexes are different. So I don't sort of blame feminism and all of this stuff. That I think there's a bit of misogyny and all of that as well that gets thrown into it.
Well, I don't read Michael's comments as being necessarily misogynist at all. I think the problem here is the following. And sometimes it really is coincidence in many respects, because obviously women, we were fighting for our rights, and many women were saying there's basically no difference between the sexes, aside that obviously I don't think many women were saying women couldn't have children. But that was translated by even politicians to mean that women and men are exactly the same. And some people have criticized feminism as giving a gateway to trans narratives of, well, if we really are the same, then what does it take for me to be the same as you? If, then you get into the arguments about women who don't have children, women without uteri, women who are menopausal.
I try to have a lot of empathy for women who are all in on gender ideology. They're very frustrating. I try to view them in the same way that, thinking of like, there were women who were against women getting the right to vote. There's always been women who are against, our own interests. And I think that there's some of these women who genuinely, they just don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what this whole issue is actually about. They haven't thought about it or read about it or anything like that. And that's fine. Everyone leads busy lives. If you're not sort of dedicating your time to this, you're never going to know. Oh, little one. Oh, Yeah. Thanks, baby. Um, and so yeah, so it's like then there's some who I think are fully aware of what's going on, but their a survival instinct is kicking in. They know that if they say what we say, they're going to get attacked, and some women can't cope with that. And I think a lot of women would prefer to be, when I say attacked, I mean like verbally, like online attacked, or like, like have someone say, like a woman say that she's an idiot, or a woman be mean to her, than a man be mean to them. Because when a man is mean to us, it's quite scary, especially in person, if in your social circle, in your real life. When a woman's mean to you, it's not nearly as scary overall, and your life's very rarely going to be threatened. So I think there's it's complicated, and there's lots of reasons. Do I think that once the social contagion breaks and it's just no longer cool to believe this, that everyone will just like forget they ever did it? Yeah. And I wouldn't even really talk about it that much. I wouldn't really care. I would just ignore it. If it was just an annoying group of people in the background on the internet saying this stupid shit, I wouldn't care. I only care because laws are being changed, because they're putting it in schools, and it's in the medical profession, and they're changing children's bodies, and they're making laws about this stuff, and they're tearing families apart. So I care. If it was just some guys, even if it was 1 million men that were suddenly getting surgery and walking around saying they were women, and everyone was just kind of going like, oh yeah. But say if they were just doing that, they weren't trying to go into female spaces, they weren't trying to go into female sport, they were just walking around saying they were women in sort of just, in title only kind of thing, I'd ignore them. I'd have fun. I don't care. I don't care if a guy wants to go and get a boob job. I care if he tries to go into a female only space. I care if he takes a woman's place in sport. And I do care about language. I do. Because already, like I'm at the point, for a while there, I was saying female a lot. And it's just actually in the last few weeks, I'm like, no, I'm saying women. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, that's your problem. I'm not going to use female to say women. I'm not giving up the word. Because the moment you give up, and you give an inch and they take a mile.
Well, you see this in the language that's used when people say biological male. I say, why are you saying that? That's like saying H2O water. We don't have to emphasize what is patently a truism.
So, and I've done it. I know I've done it. And that's what you don't even realize, that this sort of bullshit has crept into your life because you're just trying to be clear. And you shouldn't have to be man, woman. That should be it. Like I even had someone today say something like, why don't we say like penis havers here and vagina havers over there? And I was like, no, we don't need to. We have words for that. It's male and female. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We don't need anything else. We've got it. And the people that say, oh, language evolves. Yes, language does evolve. It hasn't here though. It simply hasn't. This is not like this like natural evolution in society where because there's different things and different concepts evolve. Like say the concept of privacy is the definition example I always give. Because before like social media and social networking and stuff, the concept of privacy for the internet was so different. Now what we're willing to put out there about our lives and what privacy actually means to a person, that is a word and a concept that really has evolved. The concept of woman and the word woman has not evolved. It's just trying to be stolen. And it's just, there's not a person on this planet that is treating or trying to insist that trans men are men. It's just not happening. The only time we ever hear about these people is when they're pregnant.
Exactly. And this is what I wanted to raise right now, because just as Michael separated the movement from the transsexual movement of the latter half of the 20th century to what we're living now, being buttressed now by women, even though there's loads of misogynists in on this. I mean, I'm not even saying that most of the supporters are necessarily women. They conveniently don't do studies on anything, and that included. But what is interesting is this, and this is an argument I've been making for years now, that they are making women pay who claim to be men, right? These trans men, in air quotes, they're making them pay for the movement in their bodies, because we know, statistically speaking, these women are getting, to use their sanitized terms, top and bottom surgery. We've got to stop using those terms as well.
Don't you find that interesting that it's mostly women that are having surgeries?
Yep, and they're doing it. And this is why they home in on the children. I've known this since the beginning.
Yes.
The reason is this. Men, including the man who made the complaint with the Australian Human Rights Commission against Giggle, named Tickle. I found that funny.
That was hilarious. It was so stupid, wasn't it?
I mean, imagine a judge reading the docket would have burst
I
out
know,
laughing.
it would have been, I would never have been able to keep a straight face. I would have burst out laughing in court. But anyway, so go on.
This is where these men who are aging, they transitioned in their 30s, their 40s, above, they're aging and they look like men. And the reason why they look like men is very simple. It's biological. When you give testosterone, even if you and I were to take it today, it would change a lot of our bodies very quickly. And I don't just mean facial hair. It will change the jaw structure. It will change the face. We will get masculine attributes that estrogen simply does not have that strength for changing males' bodies.
But it's simply like, even I talked to Buck Angel, and I really like Buck. I talked to Buck Angel recently. Buck passes as a trans man. Buck doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, the trans men pass as trans men. I think they pass slightly better than trans women. And one of the reasons for that is facial hair, because it disguises a lot. You know, you're sort of just hiding behind it. And you just see facial, like a beard, and you're out, man. It's why there's a lot of men who think, you know, they just see fake boobs and they go, oh, woman, whereas we can tell it's a man from a mile away.
True. But this is why the men are behind the movement. The women are the window dressing. They're the ones, you know, these men always say, would you want this person in your toilet? And they show a woman who's transitioned, who's got a full beard. Would you want him in your stall? Well, a lot of the women, including a lot of lesbians, say, of course, she's a woman. Now, does Buck Angel allow people to call her she?
We've talked about this. I called Buck she when I'm not in her presence, because why would I use a pronoun when I'm talking to her on like a Zoom call or something? And I've said, I really do like Buck as a person. He's lovely, and very funny, and one of those people that brightens a room when you see him. Well, her, there you go, I just did it then. But I'm like, it's just no disrespect to you personally. I don't even want it framed that way anymore. No one, I don't care who you are. No one is telling me how I can speak. And the thing is it just, men and women are not just what we look like. There are biological realities. And Buck is one who's very, very across all this. And there's lots of trans men out there that are actually very rational. I would argue more rational than the other side of this. But I do find that one of my most controversial opinions, I think that the male detransitioners, so just the guys who thought they were women, and then now they've come to their senses, I think that they are going to change it and really bring attention to everything more than the women detransitioners. And my reason for this, and it's especially for the ones that have been castrated. I mean, I just can't. I can't fathom living with that level of regret. They are very strong people, and they've really been wronged. And I want to change everything for them. I want to make the world better for them. It just pains me. But I think the males are going to get the attention when people start listening, like when more of them start speaking up, because there's no rights movement that is connected to a male removing his penis and testicles. It just doesn't, there's no liberation movement. There's nothing positive that's ever been attached to that. Whereas with the women's side of it, we've spent decades saying we don't have to have children, or we don't want them. And I'm all for this. I choose. I mean, I only had a baby at 37. And so that's sort of the hysterectomy element of, the sort of the not able to have children. And then sort of the mastectomy part of it is we spend this time saying, don't look at our boobs. We don't want to be sexualized in this way. And so then, there's someone now they've taken them away. And I just don't think it's breaking through to people, because they can see that they're misguided, but I think that they're trying to like silver lining it or something. And so, but the male detransitioners just cut through to the core of it, and you just go, I'm sorry, what? And yeah, that's probably my most controversial opinion on all of this. And I hope that people really do start listening. And it comes back to say, like Jon Stewart. Like, has Jon Stewart just never ever hasn't read a testimonial of a detransitioner? Possibly. I mean, he's either never read one, or he's ignored and he's just dismissed it. Either way, it means he's ill-equipped to talk on the issue. You should never. You don't put a program out there to millions of people if you're that uneducated on an issue.
You're listening to Savage Minds, and we hope you're enjoying the show. Please consider subscribing. We don't accept any money from corporate or commercial sponsors, and we depend upon listeners and readers just like you. Now, back to our show. I know that GLAAD in the US has a person who went to Hollywood specifically to work with screenwriters and to infuse trans characters within all the narratives. And we've saw it the last decade. We've seen every show on the planet have a trans character, and it was sort of out of left wing sometimes. Like Girls. I was really enjoying the show, and then one of them, the sister's daughter, becomes a boy, and I'm just like, what? What's this? You know, it was really... Yeah. It was a drip, drip, drip of an ideology where it wasn't even necessary. And I do wonder if that's why the show wasn't canceled, because I had problems just wanting to watch the show because I felt like I was being programmed, even though the other narratives were perfectly fine.
That, you know what? That's how I am with it now. I can't watch anything with it in. Whereas, like, say, if you go back to like shows like, say, like Will and Grace, for example, which was kind of like a groundbreaking show. I revisit it. It wasn't ideological. It how normal it was, and unideological, I suppose, was why it was so special. It was so great, and it just made, you know, this great acceptance for gay men. Actually, very lesbophobic in the show. I will say that's my one big criticism of it. They're really mean to lesbians, but now when you're watching stuff with the QT plus element in a show, it's just indoctrination. It's ideology. It's just like this like checklist of things. It's like exposition. They don't even like creatively find ways to say it. Someone may as well just sit there and read it off a palm card and just directly to the camera. And so telling you this is what you have to believe. And you feel like you're a conspiracy theorist when you say this kind of stuff. Because I know that even, you know, just a few years ago, I would have heard someone speaking like this and being like, surely, like, you're crazy. But then I check in with myself all the time. I'm like, am I crazy? And then I'm like, no, I'm currently trying to help get a male sex offender out of a woman's prison. This is actually happening. And so I think that there are some people who might have gotten into this thinking that they were just helping and they just wanted, you know, equality for some, you know, blokes who like wearing frocks and thought they'd be doing a good thing and didn't think that it would get to this point, but now they can't get out. It's such a dangerous, poisonous ideology that does render anyone who accepts it, you know, just an idiot, just brain dead. It's astounding. I've never seen anything like it.
Well, he has, as you noted, the people coming straight out of often Ivy League schools. They're coming out of elite institutions for sure. They're not getting this at universities in the States where the bulk of students are coming from working class backgrounds. Those are the kids that are taking business administration courses. They couldn't be bothered about literary studies. And I don't want to just blame those taking literary or cultural studies.
My best friend, sounds really random that I didn't know this until recently. My best friend of like the last 5 years, she is from Connecticut originally when we lived together in New York. She went to college at Mount Holyoke, which is like the oldest women's college in America or something, but is all in on this stuff. And when this was like early 2010s when she was there, if not, she's only 2 years younger than me, so it must have been late 2000s when she was there. There was the trans men thing had already started, and it was this whole thing of like, but they were at the time trying to have these trans men be able to stay at the university, like on campus. And so the university was like, yeah, fine, they're women, who cares? But she had to start when she realized what was happening around the same time I did. And she had to start unpacking things. And it was from then she realized that she'd been indoctrinated into this stuff from university days. And so she was unlearning a lot and felt very manipulated by, you know, the people that were supposed to have her best interest at heart, so she thought. And that was supposed to educate her, and she just felt that hasn't happened.
There's a whole generation of people who've been indoctrinated within this. But beyond the students going to these elite institutions, there are a lot of people who are working full-time in academia, not just professors. You have this, and we've seen it in the UK with the cases of Maya Forstater, for instance. But beyond that, the capture is everywhere. If it can be in a think tank that has offices between the US and the UK, and one can feasibly not have one's contract renewed because one recognizes that sex is immutable, that humans are not Nemo, that we're not clownfish, then where does this end? And the other day, I spoke with an American political scientist on this issue. He has really good analysis. Here was one of my issues. He took issue with my calling the transgender narrative an ideology. But what else is it, since there is no science to it? There is no truth to it. All these institutions, from the legal to the medical, have refused to do long-term studies and follow-up. So they, of course, can say there's no desistance, there's no reversal, there's no regret, because they just fuck off with their statistics. They don't give a shit about these people. I said to him, you don't see men being called by official government health agencies, by NGOs purporting to care for male cancer. You don't see them being called prostate havers, testicle havers, low danglers, weenie havers. You don't see any of it. My favorite, well, I made this up, front noodlers. You don't see men being called these very dehumanizing terms. Flip the coin, though, and you see from the 2015-16 moment onward, we saw a lot of these folks, the trans advocates on Twitter, saying, but you're a biological reductionist. No, you're the one calling me a uterus carrier.
Exactly. I hate it when it's so frustrating when you see that in this narrative of like, oh, you're just, like they'll say to us, oh, you're reducing women to their body parts because we're saying that, no women have penises. But at the same time, they will say that, oh, they'll call us uterus havers or vulva owners and all of that shit. And it's actually, I read a really great thing about it recently, actually. It is actually all part of the effort to deconstruct, separate the woman from the body. That's the whole plan. In one sense of all of this is that there's no concept of a female, basically. And that's the danger. Once there's no concept of a female, what are we? We're at the absolute mercy of the people who define us, which is terrifying.
And those people will be front noodlers. This is the paradox. Yes, all the women on the front line cheering because they're like me feminists or they're like me women. What they don't understand is this isn't The Bachelor. No one's going to marry them and save them. They're tanking it for all of us. And I have this discussion with my wife quite a bit because sometimes she gets annoyed by the fact that I write letters of complaint about I had to deal with a xenophobic, racist and homophobic GP that said the most atrocious things to me earlier this year when I was the victim of poisoning. Well, I told my wife, I said, do you think that you have rights because people are just generous? No. Women had to get in the way of horses for the right to vote. Women had to die. Women had to starve themselves in prison. Women had to turn popular opinion against the men making decisions to keep them locked up. The fact that we have toilets is a very recent innovation, in air quotes, innovation, it was convenient to these men, to society, to keep us at home. It is convenient, as I wrote in my recent piece on the London School of Economics, related to the pedophile on the Board of Trustees of Mermaids, who is employed by the LSE, that the London School of Economics, with its gender studies, airy-fairy department, they know what a woman is because I sat for an interview when I was 7 months pregnant with my son in 2015, and I can tell you that when they said I was the top candidate for that job, can you start on September 1st? And I said, yes, but around the 26th, I'm going to have to take a couple of days off. And they said, why? I realized they not only didn't realize I was pregnant, I was wearing a black shirt. It wasn't really that loose, but whatever. I was very pregnant. I pointed to my belly and, talk about turn that frown upside down. It was the inverse. These women went from being so elated to the dog shat the carpet, as I wrote in my piece. And I never got the job. The way I was handled by the university's human resources department was abysmal. I was forced to sign an NDA in return for paltry sum, which is not what I wanted. I had asked the department in the UK that precedes an employment tribunal that you must go through. You have no choice but to go through them. What would you like? They asked me. And I said, well, I'd like the job, and I'd like for the LSE to not do this again. I'd like that they train everyone, not just hiring committees, that they train people about sex-based discrimination. It was no to both. Why can't I have the job? They've already offered it to someone. I said, well, of course, that's called what has happened here. I'm coming to you because of this. The reality is that these institutes, these universities, these private secondary schools, because it's also taught there, they are peddling snake oil because they're peddling to the class, the clientele of people who, like Warren Beatty's daughter, can go on to produce films, and he's got his foot in Hollywood. So does, Annette Bening. They are not going to lose anything. They've no skin in the game. They're not going to have their daughter in a prison with a rapist. They're not going to have to go to a public YMCA to swim with a man with his dick hanging out. They're not going to have their daughter, even if she identifies as a transgender man, air quotes, having to compete at a swim meet against a 6'3" man. This is the biggest bullshit narrative of all time because it's being peddled, yes, by the TAs themselves, but it's also being peddled by a load of people who have no skin in the game, who aren't gay, who aren't trans, and they love it because it makes them money.
Oh, 100%. 100%. One of my favorite quotes on the whole thing about this is from Dave Chappelle. I'm paraphrasing the quote slightly, and my delivery will never be his, but he says, if white men weren't doing it, no one would pay attention. This is a white man's game. If you wanted to go into even the identity politics of it, it's a white man's game, without a doubt. Absolutely. And you've got, even just Jamie Lee Curtis has been talking about her son who thinks he's a woman recently. And, you see pictures of this individual. One just clearly looks like a dude, and two dresses like a pornified version of a woman. So you're just like, you guys don't even realize that you're just like parading your porn addiction around, that we can tell. And I think one of the things, and I thought about this a lot, like with the human rights complaint thing, of why they get so angry at us. So in Australia, for example, to get your birth at the time, to get your birth certificate changed to female, you actually had to have the full surgery. So I have to assume that the individual who did the human rights complaint has had the full surgery. And it must be horrible on a human level if you go and cut your penis off and then some girl turns around and says, oh, you're not a woman, you're a man. You've really done everything. You've done something so big. And you've been promised. So I think it's pure evil to tell children and vulnerable adults that you can change sex and then to take money from them and perform surgeries that don't do that. It's just... So, even someone who I really, really don't like, someone who was to take me to do a human rights complaint against me, I'm like, this person is a victim of this. I feel very sorry for them. They have been grossly misinformed and used by the medical community. And I hate it. I hate it for all involved.
That's what I say to everyone who says it's mean to not use preferred pronouns. I'm like, let's be very clear here. Nobody has a pronoun. You don't actually own your own pronouns. Look at me. If I sort of want them to pass a law that makes misgendering illegal, because I'd be as wealthy as Bill Gates with my name. So there's that. But let's put that aside. So I tell these people all the time. Daily I get Mr. Vigo. But I tell these people all the time, who's really mean here? You cheerleading these people. This is cruel. Yes. And in history, you will not go down well. Because I'll tell you something that's very different, even though comparisons are made between this lobby and the era of electroshock therapy from, let's just say, Frances Farmer, what happened to her, to all the gay men, mostly some women, who were put into these mental institutions to be shocked into heterosexuality. What we didn't have, and this is going to be a bad look for all of you on Twitter, where we're, not me, but loads of feminists are screen capping these people. You did not have people outside of these mental hospitals with signs saying, shock the fuck out of my gay brother. You didn't have the public pushing this on because, to the detriment of what we know today about that era, the public was completely uninformed. People did not know what was happening. And Frances Farmer, I mean, she was raped in her mental institution by one of the workers at the hospital. So people will watch that movie with Jessica Lange and they'll be horrified about what happened to her, let's say. But at the same time, from the other side of their mouth, they'll be like, well, there's no harm in having men in women's prisons. They are more concerned about the feelings of men, really, than the safety of women. This is why in the article I wrote about the LSE, I began with my proposition of what I knew for years, that there were two fluffy white kittens in the room. And it was always going to be sports and children. Because when you cross sports, even men don't like that. In fact, it's really sad to say that men woke up over Hannah Mountsie, not over Sally being raped in her prison cell in Texas. And then children. People don't like the idea of children being chemically castrated, surgically operated, told that if they like gardening, they must be, well, what do you do with that one? If you like making cookies, what do you do with that?
No, I honestly think most people, the things that are happening to children, it's so outrageous that most people think it's not true because it can't possibly be. I've had this conversation just really lightly with my auntie who's like, early 70s. And she's dipping her toes into asking what's happening. For the last 3 years, she hasn't wanted to know. When I started to tell her, she was just like, the look of horror on her face and of her going like, you could see her thinking, I want to go back to 2 minutes ago when I didn't know this. It was a better time.
Yeah.
Because it's that horrific. And I said to her, I was like, you haven't even seen the pictures yet. Because I can't look at them. I can't look at the pictures of the young girls' chests. It breaks my heart, and I find it just looks barbaric.
Did you see what has happened in Parliament yesterday in the UK?
Yeah, UK, yeah.
What I've always been saying about this as well, I said, isn't it phenomenal? I'm in the gay community, and we were told when these laws were made against gay conversion therapy that this was criminal. But how many years has it taken to launch criminal investigations into what was clearly, because back in 2013 and 14, I was saying there is no such thing as having a true gender identity, because the minute you accept that is the minute you accept what's happening to children at Mermaids. And it's gay conversion therapy versus what they're calling a refusal to accept one's true gender identity. They're at conflicts. They're at odds.
It must feel odd when you're a child. Even if you're just in your 10, even an early teenager, and you're being just taught that everyone has a gender identity and things like that. You could just assume that this is always taught. It's been taught forever, that everyone thinks this way, except for these, bigoted, weird people over here. But if that's just what you're being told by, the people in authority, they're not going to sit there going, oh, because they don't have the point of reference to go, oh, this is new. This has only been happening for the last 5 years. They're just going to assume that it's been happening forever. So, of course, then they're going to go, oh, okay, so hang on, this has been happening forever. And, oh, boys can be girls and girls can be boys. So they're not being given the context of this, which makes it even crueler. And so, no, I think the people who are pushing it belong in prison. I honestly do. I think that they belong in prison.
I agree. Well, a lot of people are saying, well, Mermaids started off differently. And some people say they changed course in 2015-16. I'm like, no, they didn't. I spoke to them in March or February of 2013. I wrote what they said. I wrote what that woman said at Mermaids. And if you can't see homophobia in someone saying, if your son wants to play in a Wendy house, he must be a girl, with the statistics that we do have, thanks to the sacrifices made by Kenneth Zucker and the fact that he was railroaded by this massively fatuous, dishonest lobby. Let's just say what it is, because they've invented everything. That's why Michael Bigg's work on the suicide statistics is so important, as well as his recent debunking of other nonsense coming from Jack Turban. So we've got what is a clear, I call it a waffling of fake news. And I used this example the other day that if I write a paper that I say pink elephants can fly, and then you, Sal, write a paper quoting my paper saying that pink elephants can fly, after a bit of people citing your or my paper, or the person who cites your paper citing my paper, they're going to go up in Google rankings. And this is a fact. The fake articles, the unsubstantiated fake bullshit that's been published to include that piece of shit that Nature, one of the world's most important science publications, ran Paisley Curra's nonsensical fiction. Even though it was an op-ed, again, a lot of people whose reading depth only lasts 240 characters will see Paisley Curra in Nature and say, oh, I guess she has it right. We've got serious problems in science where that chain of who refers to whom is being buttressed by the very people kicking us off of social media. And you know, Maya Forster is now kicked off of Twitter. What the fuck?
I don't think it's permanent. Is it just a suspension? I don't think it's permanent.
Well, look at us talking about, I feel like I'm in high school. How long is she suspended
I know.
for
I hope
smoking?
it's not permanent. I mean, it's outrageous either way. I got a 12-hour suspension the other day, actually. They removed it after 3 hours because I appealed it. And because they had said it was abuse and harassment because I'd said die turfs in the tweet, but I was quoting what they do to us. And so
well, that's the thing. And then the people who say die in a fire turfs, they're still up there.
They don't get, it's absolutely insane. Yeah, it is.
No, well, years ago, I read a piece for the Huffington Post about this. The fact that women are kicked off of Twitter, but rape 'em and tape 'em tweets are still up there. Rape 'em and tape 'em. And there was with photos, FYI.
I had somebody come after me with pictures of like my last name's Grover, and I had the Sesame Street Muppet Grover, which I mean I've had a Grover toy. My daughter now has one. I've had a Grover toy since the day I was born. Like it's this like family tradition. But I had this person coming at me. They make like Photoshop Grover in a noose, and they were sending me these things, and I kept reporting them to Twitter, being like, Can you stop this? But I was blocking the person, but they just kept doing it. They kept making new accounts and doing it. And no, it wasn't violating their rules, apparently.
Well, you're lucky you got a response from them. Because of lockdown, I've had very limited interaction on that, which was good in many respects, given the psychological stress of lockdown. But one thing that has stood out to me about this, aside from this being post-2000, a largely female demographic, both supporting this in terms of the figureheads. I'm thinking Polly Carmichael, Judith Butler in her nonsensical interviews, where I've always joked about this, saying, has she read herself? Because I don't think Judith Butler's read Judith Butler, because her early work is definitely not about people going out and getting sex changes. I'm going to use that 70s term because I think it's useful. You've talked a bit about the sexism you faced, especially when you were in Hollywood. Now, there are people who, again, this was happening when I was dealing with the trans lobby on Twitter around 2014-15. They were saying that feminists were involved as a means of competing in the oppression Olympics. And I would say to these men, look, I've been to your spaces. I've been to, what's that website? It's called Susan's Place. Have you been to Susan's Place? Don't go on a full stomach. It's the most fetishistic, misogynist website out there. If I were to go to a straight-on Pornhub site, I would find less misogyny. Let's put it that way. So I told these guys, this isn't about oppression Olympics. What you are doing is woman face claiming that it's the Victor Victoria thing, but you're claiming that we just don't see you clearly. At least in Victor Victoria, Julie Andrews knew she was a woman pretending to be a man, pretending to be a woman. Here, you want us to go along with that fiction into STFU. So this has become a full 360 of men performing us, saying that, Katie Montgomery, we do it better than you. They are better than us. Hence, we're cis. We're second-class citizens in our own sex class. And we defer to them. Oh, Katie, please tell me how to dress today. How should I tilt my head for that photo? You notice there are 1950s photos. They're always tilting with the hands under the chin. And we see through it. You see through it. You've worked in Hollywood. Can you discuss a bit about how your experience with sexual harassment in that profession did your head in, but in a way informed you about how to handle this lobby?
Completely trained me for this. I mean, everything I'm doing now is basically inspired by that. I mean, it's what made me want to create a digital female only space, is because in the sort of, as Me Too was emerging and I was talking to other women in Hollywood, we were realizing that if we'd been able to speak to each other, if there was a place where we could have gone to talk about this, that it was like the conversation was welcomed and we wouldn't be judged or be seen by men or anything, we would have, it would have happened earlier, or at the very least, we wouldn't have thought we were the only ones going through it, because industries like Hollywood, they're designed to be very isolating. Like, I honestly, when I was constantly being sexually harassed and assaulted, I thought I was the only person it was happening to, because that's how they make you feel. Like it's only you that it's happening to, because either you brought this on yourself or you deserve it or whatever. And then you'll see, like, there'll always be like that one woman they allow to be being successful at the time, you know, because it's like they have to have some going through, so that it does, you know, so it's not obvious. And so it would make us feel worse about ourselves at the same time. Like, and don't get me wrong, like all the women there experience just absolute hell. And I'm sure that there are some women who can just handle it better. And I did struggle for a long time with angry at myself that I wasn't able to cope with it, but I just couldn't. I mean, I was getting groped and outright abused. It was almost daily by the end. It was just horrible. And I couldn't write anymore because writing meant I was going to be in rooms with these men. And it just, yeah, it was horrible. And now I just, you know, for getting so attacked and essentially cancelled for creating an app for women, I just feel like my entire professional life has been dodging attacks from men. I mean, it just sort of is what it is. I can handle it in a few ways because, like, you know, I suppose because I had therapy to recover from the trauma of sexual assault and harassment. So this is kind of nothing, just on a personal level, compared to that. So you know, if someone does insult me online or something like that, I'm like, yeah, cool, whatever. But my determination is just so much more than it has ever been, because I'm like, no, misogynists took one career away from me. They're not taking another. So when I, you know, obviously I come at this, you know, from the personal and political aspect of, like, I want to protect women's rights. I am a woman. I now have a daughter. I want all women to have rights. This is really important to me. But then I also have, like, the business element of it. And we didn't create this app in response to what is happening, into how important female spaces have actually become due to this horrible debate and mess and whatever it is. And, you know, when in end of 2018, 19, when we started developing the app and it was getting built and everything, you know, we were getting investors on board and everything, we didn't know what was happening. It just wasn't in Australia yet. I mean, laws were being changed, but it was definitely not in the mainstream. I was in like a little liberal bubble. It was not something I was aware that was actually going on. I was still in a very Me Too world, I suppose. And so now there's sometimes, like, it's, oh gosh, it's like the weight on your chest, because I have, like, just business wise, I have people I answer to. And when you get cancelled and suddenly no media will talk to you, no online platform will run your ads, nothing. We would, at one point, there was Facebook, Google, Twitter, everything had banned our ads. We were completely banned from them all, from advertising on them. And you just go, well, what do you do? But we're actually in the process right now where no one listening to this, don't even go and download the app. We're actually, it's semi-closed down right now. We're actually rebranding and we're launching a website element of it. We're doing a tablet version, and then obviously then the app one, it still be female only and lesbian dating and Twitter for women only. And just, we've learned so much in the last few years and we're streamlining it all, and it's just all exciting. And so as stressful and horrible as it all is, we just, you know, we've learned so much. Females only spaces, as I said, have only become more important. And so I try to look at the positives. Sometimes it's really hard. Like today, like just the last 2 days have been hard because we're just trying to get this man out of this woman's prison. And it's just, you would think that you would at least find one compassionate person in a position of power to do something about it. And at the moment there's none. And so I'm feeling a bit disillusioned by that.
Well, I saw a letter. It was shared online. In
Yeah.
fact, earlier this week interviewed Catherine Deves,
Oh, yeah.
and it was about this very subject by
Yeah.
Penny Wong, I believe. And
Yeah.
what the hell?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, I've been, as I said, blocked by politicians online over this. The Australian Human Rights Commission told us to contact the Victorian Human Rights Commission, who then told us that there's nothing that they can do. And you're like, so what's the point of you? I mean, the Australian Human Rights Commission would come after me and uphold a complaint by a man who claims to be a woman who wants to go on an app for women. They spent their time with that. They dedicated man hours to that, but they won't do anything about getting a convicted male rapist out of a woman's prison. Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think, if they wanted to, they would. If they wanted to bring attention to it, they would. They obviously don't. Because if you need to insist to everybody that trans women are women, well, you have to then go, yeah, well, you're going to get some male rapists in women's prisons. What are you going to do about it? They can't admit that it's wrong because everything will come falling down. They cannot admit. So, I mean, Kath and I have been talking about it. I'm saying, like, you just have to get more and more attention brought to it, because watching these people try to justify and defend having a male sex offender in a woman's prison will pique everybody, because they'll just sound so damn stupid, but they don't want any attention brought to it. They know they can't defend it. So yeah, it is what it is.
Well, there is a denial in all of our societies, however, to discuss sexual violence against women. And I had a man say to me, well, feminists exaggerate it. And I said to him, sit down for this one. Think of your mother, her mother, her mother, her mother, just a few generations. In all likelihood, one of your female 5 generations up relatives, if not 2 of them, have been raped. And he was looking at me.
Oh, I have that reaction. Yeah.
And all of them have been sexually harassed. All of them. I know no woman who said she has never been sexually harassed. And we look at what rape means today, because we use these words like pedophilia. Well, let's call it what it is. It's rape of children. Sexual assault, the difference in many countries, such as the US, between sexual assault and rape. Again, people are making a big difference if it's a bottle or a penis, whatever. These are violent crimes. And when you start to look at where rape is most common, it makes people extremely uncomfortable, because it's not Law and Order SVU on the streets of New York and Central Park. It's in the family. And so when you look back to those 5 generations of women, the sexual assault happening to women and girls and to boys is almost always located in the family. Yeah. And this is something that people are so uncomfortable to discuss. And I have to wonder if that sock drawer to arrange, as I like to compare this to, is always thrown to women. It's our task to fix the sock drawer, not men's, because it's an inconvenient truth that implicates them and them alone. Why should we be cleaning up their mess? Why can't there be mandatory schooling of boys in their sex ed classes to understand not just sexual assault, not just consent, but beyond that? Let's talk about the history of rape. Let's talk about the reason why women don't like war is because we pay for it. The women are not just saying no to war because they don't want their sons being killed.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's a good example, because men pay for war as well. I mean, men die.
Oh, of course. Oh, I'm not saying they don't. I'm talking about just the rape aspect of it. I'm not saying, oh no, war is bad for men, obviously. Yeah. They are the ones who pay for it with their bodies in every way. But when you look at what happened in the 90s, during the war in the former Yugoslavia, the rapes that I got to a point around, in the early 90s where I had to turn off my radio, NPR. I couldn't listen anymore. Yeah. And I was just in defiance of reality at that point, because I did not want to wake up every morning to more rape stories. But this is the reality that we don't want to address. Obviously, war is bad. But then, ironically, you've got Biden being trolled online these days because all the trans allies are pissed off because he said that transgender women have to register for selective service. The Pentagon knows what a man is, right?
Of course, I mean, but they only know what a man. They only think they're women when in relation to women's spaces. They actually don't, and women's sports. They don't think they're women in any other way when it comes to how much they get paid or positions of being CEO or anything like that. It's It's nonsense. And it just shows, it just constantly shows it's just nonsense. And it's just making, our job is basically to wake people up to the nonsense. If you're going to get into arguments with people about like, you know, into like really metaphysical arguments or whatever, it's you are playing their game, basically. You just have to say to people, show them the evidence, that's it, leave the room. Let them come to their own conclusions. Most thinking adults will come to the sane, right conclusions.
What do you see happening there in Australia? Because the UK has made great progress. And if we can get a criminal investigation of mermaids to finally enforce what the law states, that conversion therapy of gay boys and girls is wrong. Meanwhile, many states in the US have women fighting to free women of men in their prisons. What do you see happening in Australia to get this moving?
I think that there's going to come a point, hopefully sooner rather than later, and I think it will be that there will be a high court case against the Sex Discrimination Act, and the gender identity clause will be removed. I think that's what will happen. I think it will be pretty swift. Australia is very spread out, and the population is obviously very spread out. But the pockets of people who are for this, I mean, it's really inner city. You know, it just normal everyday people like that are living lives in suburbs and small towns and all that. They are not for this shit. You know, they've got more real stuff. They're not just sitting there like on a university campus, you know, banging on about this crap. So yeah, I think that the way to wake Australians up to it is through sport, because, and then you get their attention with sport, and then you can throw things out there like, oh, there's a male rapist in a women's prison while I've got you. But yeah, we're such an athletic and sporty country that sport is the way to do it. And I think that, you know, for example, like the Australian Institute of Sport, the head of that, Kieran Perkins, he's all for trans women and women's sports. And it's like, well, then you're not fit for the role. You shouldn't have that job. Because if you're going to actually dismantle women's sports when you're in the head of basically the Sporting Association of Australia, then you shouldn't be able to do that job.
Well, I have an idea of advocacy that you might use on this person, because I thought of this the other day. I wrote it on my Facebook page. I said, we need to use their tactics and get this person on the phone and say, what are you doing in my office? And he will say, what do you mean? And you say, I am you. And he'll be like, what are you talking about? Yes. And just identify as them and say, you better get out of my house and give me my car keys and my house keys back, or I'm calling the police. Because what they don't realize, it's crazy. You have to out crazy the crazy, because they have basically done just that. And we would never accept dial in for murder type of situation where I'm like, okay, Sal, I'm you. No, but that's what they're doing. It's you said this was the most egregious form of assault on women in your lifetime. And I have to agree, it's invasion of the body snatchers by men in dresses claiming to be us, telling us to ironically shut the fuck up because only men in dresses have a voice. I mean, it's misogyny 101 in drag. Do my thing with the guy, prank him, call him.
I agree with you. I think that is the way to do it. I think like even I've seen a few people lately dressing up as these people, like there's sort of like the big boob Canadian teacher that they've gone to school for, dressed as him. There was a mother that went to a meeting the other day dressed in the outfit of the drag queen at Story Hour. And so she was able to show, like, you know, it was such an inappropriate outfit for her to be wearing to a school board meeting. And she was like, but if it's inappropriate here, how is it appropriate at Children's Story Hour?
She's coming on the show in 10 days.
Oh, she's fantastic. She's really, really fantastic.
Her name is Kimberly Reichs. And when I saw that picture, I was like, yes, because we need more of that. We do.
I think that coalitions of dads should, in any country or state with self-ID, I think that they should go and pay the $35 or whatever measly amount that it is. Everyone go and use it. Go and just inundate and change. Go and change your birth certificates.
Can you change it to something that's not a sex?
What they're changing it to in where I live, yes, soon, if this passes, which it will, They're sort of putting it through in stealth. Yeah, so long as it doesn't include a swear word and it's under 100 characters. Yeah, you can anything. So if you want it to be like, like hippopotamus,
Rocky Road ice cream.
yeah, that's what you put. It's nonsense. It's the stupidest thing ever. So it's what's happening.
Well, what are you going to change your sex to then?
I would honestly, like, if there was a lot of women that would do it with me, I would say for us all to go and change our sex to male and then demand to be treated as such.
That would be great. Well, I would do it. I said this years ago when they introduced this, that a group of women should band together, just like, I don't know if you remember the group in England of women that would put mustaches and fake beards on and go to the men's swim hour, Man Friday. I think women should do this to make the point. Yeah. The sad part is that there's no benefit for women to claim to be men now. They would just, you see.
Oh, of course. But no, I think they're just going in like sort of, when there was the possibility that I was going to go to federal court, I did think that I would identify as something ridiculous and have some stupid neo-pronouns that they would have to use throughout the whole time I was on the stand, just because they wouldn't be able to say I wasn't without destroying their whole case.
Well, if you had to go on the stand, you should just say, my pronouns are, I'm a moron. So every time someone says you...
my pronouns are fuck you, and use them as such. Thank you very much. And no, but I think because it's so easy to completely tear apart their whole ideology that way. It's that easy to do. I even said to someone the other day, I was like, you could have a guy that agrees with us that could just take us to court for discrimination, just lying through his ass, claiming that he's a woman, so that we could get the gender identity clause out of the Sex Discrimination Act. And none of them would be able to say he's not a woman without proving our point. So that's arguably get away with it. That's how weak this whole thing is. We've just got to be a little bit creative and I think bold in dismantling it.